What is up, everyone, and welcome back to the Talking Sports podcast right here on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. If you're coming over from our NFL preview, appreciate that. Give that a listen. If you have not given that a listen, go please do that. We really appreciate it. I broke down all four of the divisional round games. I gave you my picks and predictions and my best bets. But if you're just here for college football, the best sport on the planet Earth, then really appreciate it. We're breaking down Ohio State versus Notre Dame. You guys saw us do the first round preview. You saw us do a quarterfinal preview, and you saw us do a semifinal preview. But before we do that, before we break down Ohio State versus Notre Dame, follow us on social media at Talking Sports PD on X and on Instagram. And as always, we are sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you guys use code TSP for 100% deposit match up to $100. That's out of the way. Ryan, welcome back to the program. You've been here for a couple weeks. It's like a recurring guest, but
it's a long playoff.
Before we get to Notre Dame, Ohio State, we kind of did this last week. Any final takeaways from Texas, Ohio State, and Notre Dame, Penn State that maybe could bleed into Ohio State, Notre Dame?
Yeah, I mean, when we were signing off last round, I just said I hope that we get two really good games, and the sport kind of really needs it, and we did. We totally did. I mean, Penn State, Notre Dame started really slow, which I think we all thought was going to happen. Two good defenses, two quarterbacks who hadn't really been in a huge spot like that, feeling each other out. And the second half was just crazy, like big plays that you didn't really expect, big kicks, coaching decisions, everything you want from like a good second half of a game. Notre Dame just made one more play. That's kind of been their mantra for a lot of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And the second game, I mean, if we talked about this before we started, like if you just look at the score, if someone didn't watch the game to look at the score, they'd be like, oh, Ohio State won by 2 touchdowns. Like that's what they expected. That was not a 2-touchdown game. Like anyone who watched the game, I mean, that was a tie game in the fourth quarter. And even way after that, I mean, we can get into it, but Texas was on the doorstep of tying it again with, I think, 3 minutes left. Like that was a very competitively played, even game by probably the two best rosters in the country. So it makes sense. My takeaways at Ohio State, they were not as sharp as they were the first 2 weeks, but I don't think it was possible. Like a little regression had to come at some point, and it did. And Texas couldn't take advantage enough.
Yeah. You and I talked about off air before we hit record, how if you're a Penn State fan and if you're a Texas fan right now, you're in a lot of pain because it's not like, obviously, look, if your team gets blown out in the semifinals or you lose a game in the semifinals, you're going to be in pain. It's disappointing and it stinks. But the way both teams lost, Penn State with Drew Aller throwing that interception across his body, which is one of the worst decisions we've seen in a while, and it's just lack of judgment. It's not knowing the time and score almost. Like,
yeah,
you know, at that point, you're better off just taking a sack or just throwing at an offensive lineman's head. Like, anything besides what he did. And then if you're Texas, right, you have given up that huge touchdown to Travion Henderson right before the half where you kind of got all the momentum back. You're tied up and you're like, oh, crap. Everyone that watches games like Ohio State feels like they should be winning. We're tied up. And then you give up that huge touchdown. And then how the game ends when you're first and goal at the 2-yard line, 1-yard line, and you decide to run a pitch play, which I guess Steve Sarkisian is probably never going to call that play ever again. Or you should never call that play again. Like that was one of the more boneheaded plays. And you and I have a similar opinion on this, that those long run plays that take forever to get going on a run, when you only need 1 or 2 yards and your running back's 8 yards back and he has to go 8 yards to get 1 yard. Like those are they're brutal to watch. And that was just terrible. And then obviously Quinn Ewers fumbles, which is it's the huge play of the game. That's not even the biggest play. It's this what set up that play.
Yeah. I'm sure like Texas' offense looked fine for most of the game. Not great, but like 95% of defenses Texas plays, like that play probably works against because you have better athletes. You can get out there and block. But like, I think Caleb Downs was the first one to him. He wasn't even touched by anyone. He just read that so perfectly.
Dude's an All-American.
Yeah, it was incredible. That wasn't, if I was a Texas fan, I'd really be kicking myself. You have that play, which was huge. Giving up the screen pass touchdown. I mean, it happens. It was a great play. It's frustrating, but it's not like that was a poor decision. It was just Ohio State ran a great play. And another kind of under the radar misplay was so Will Howard ran for almost a touchdown on like a 4th and 2 in a tie game in the 4th quarter. The play before that.
Is that when he tripped?
Yeah, so he trips, but he gets a big conversion on 4th and 2 from Texas 34. The play before that was 3rd and 9, and Will Howard passed it to like the backup tight end in the flat, and he should have been tackled for no gain of 1 yard, but he breaks a tackle, doesn't get the first down, but brings it from 3rd and 9 to 4th and 2 instead of being like 4th and 7, 4th and 8. That's a huge play because I don't think Ohio State's going for it in 4th and 8 in that situation from what would have been their own 45-yard line. Like they would have punted probably, or from Texas 45-yard line.
Yeah, they played the field position game.
So if you're a Texas fan, you left a lot on the table. Penn State, same thing. I totally forgot about that interception. I mean, I watched that whole game. That was really bad. Penn State was up 10-0.
And they got complacent in the second half.
You could have. They got up 10-0, and then Notre Dame ran a great 2-minute drill with the backup quarterback. Like that's got to be frustrating. And then a great drive to start the second half, and then it was on from that point. Neither team looked like incredible because they both played really good teams and really big games.
You and I talked about Texas' defense. We thought was legit. We were also waiting for them to play higher competition. We can probably walk away from that game and say their defense was legit the whole year.
They played great, except for
I think Penn State's defense was legit the whole year. Notre Dame rushed for 2.8 yards a carry. So, that was a great game. You mentioned it, how we signed off last episode. We won in 2 great games. You and I both don't have a team in this race, and obviously we want good games. And as we shift over to Notre Dame and Ohio State, we want another great game, right? Because you kind of forget the semifinal games if the national championship kind of isn't great, or the average fan doesn't. You and I won't, because we live and die with college football for the most. We don't die, but we live and we do a lot of college football here. But if you walk away from Notre Dame, Ohio State, and this was just boring, or it's a blowout, I'm not saying that's what we're predicting, then you have a little bit of sour taste in your mouth. So let's get to that, right? We have Ohio State taking on Notre Dame. Right now, we are recording Thursday, January 16th. You guys will be seeing this Saturday. It comes out Saturday into Sunday, obviously, and into Monday. Right now, Ohio State's 8.5-point favorites. So don't get mad at me if they're 9.5-point favorites on Monday. That's not my fault. But they're 8.5-point favorites right now. Ryan, let's break down both teams here. Let's start with the Ohio State here. First thing that kind of comes to mind with Ohio State, how do they match up with Notre Dame? Just Ohio State in general.
Yeah, what we saw last round from Ohio State was the Ohio State that we saw, I would say, for a majority of the regular season, which is a really good team with a really talented roster. It wasn't the unbeatable 2019 LSU Death Star that we saw the first rounds of the playoffs, but they don't need to be that to beat anyone besides Michigan, I guess. They looked good. They looked probably like they did against Penn State, or like they did against Indiana, in the regular season. And if they just play at 75, 80% capacity, that's enough. It was enough against Texas. We talked about it off air. Jeremiah Smith was just taken out of the game. I mean, Texas defense, the game plan was good. The execution was good. And Ohio State did enough. They can win in different ways. They have enough avenues there. I mean, just that the screen pass, right, to Henderson shows he was an afterthought on the offense, coming into the game with Judkins and how good Smith had been. And that one play changed the whole game. Texas had all the momentum going into halftime. I thought Ohio State it was a conservative play call that hit for a big play. Yeah. Completely changed the game. Will Howard wasn't great, not like he was in the first 2 rounds.
He kind of let the game kind of come to him almost. He wasn't
the Texas defenders were getting their hands on the ball. A few batted away balls.
He wasn't risking it. He threw a bad interception. I remember. I think he had 1 interception in the game. He threw an interception across the middle of the field. Jeremiah Smith was afterthought. Travion Henderson had 6 carries, averaged 7 yards a carry. It was more Junkins. They didn't run the ball particularly great against Texas.
No,
Ohio
but
State,
that's really hard to do.
really hard to do. It's hard to, but no, but their defense is unbelievable, right? They had 4 sacks and they had 9 tackles for loss. Like their defense was just flying around. Their secondary was really good. They pose a huge problem for Notre Dame. Their defense poses a huge problem for Notre Dame just because they can get after anybody. They can stop the run. They can stop the mobile quarterback. They're probably the best defense in the country, talent-wise. Texas and Notre Dame probably right there as well, and so is Penn State, which is kind of crazy. So, but look, from that Texas game, I didn't walk away like this was A+ Ohio State. But like you said, they're so talented. As long as they don't play like they did against Michigan, they're probably going to win 99% of their games, right? And they did against Texas. I do think in this game, Will Howard's going to have to play a little better and is probably going to have to make 1 or 2 more throws than he did against Texas. I just think that's how the game script's going to go. But I do expect them to kind of lean on the run a little more, and Henderson and Junkins. But I also wrote down in my notes, lean on the run, but don't be conservative, because they leaned on the run against Michigan, then they got conservative.
Too much, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a balance there, but Notre Dame did give up 204 yards on the ground against Penn State. And Singleton and Allen are great running backs, but so is Junkins and Henderson. It's a similar kind of concept, 2 running backs. So I think that's where kind of Ohio State can get after Notre Dame, especially on the ground.
Yeah, for sure. And when we talk about how Ohio State didn't look amazing, I really more mean the offense in that sense, because the defense was still really good. I thought, honestly,
offense was just wasn't as explosive as it was against.
No, and I think a lot of that's Texas's defense, like we said. I think Ewers looked pretty good for a lot of stretches of this game. Texas defense, or Ohio State's defense, they got burned for like the same play twice for a touchdown, which was kind of weird. Same like shark wheel. But when they had to make a play at the end of the game, they got hit with some ticky-tack penalties there. Texas gets the ball down to the 1. They stuff them up the middle first, which everyone's going to talk about the pitch. First play, stuff them up the middle, completely blow up the pitch. I think it was incomplete pass, and then strip sack, 85-yard touchdown. So
iconic
defense stepped up, and Notre Dame's offense presents a different challenge than Texas's offense, but it's not like incredibly explosive dynamic in a way that Texas isn't. It's not. They're not beating you down the field either. So
they're kind of similar. Like they want to play the long game. Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame, especially obviously we're talking about Notre Dame here, but we'll weave both teams in here. But Notre Dame wants to play the long game, and I didn't think Jeremiah Love looked particularly healthy against Penn State. He kind of got better as the game went on. It felt like he kind of needed to kind of try out his knee and kind of let it go. But they didn't run the ball particularly great against Penn State. And look, great house for Notre Dame, made a couple hell of a play there for Notre Dame. But they need their weapons to kind of step up here. It's one of those kind of, you're going to need a couple explosive plays, because I don't think you can just methodically drive the ball down the field over and over again against Ohio State and kind of expect to win the game. I just don't think that's an option. And look, Ohio State's going to sell out for the run, and they're going to sell out for the quarterback run, right? And if Leonard can beat them over the top, look, what's that corner's name? I always forget his name for Ohio State. That has about 85 defensive pass in the
I don't know, but it wasn't
Igbinosun or something like that. Number 24 for Ohio State. I forgot how to say his name, but he struggles. And look, if they can target him and they can go after him, they can move the ball down the field. Do you trust Riley Leonard enough to make enough throws? Because you and I have probably gone back and forth on this conversation. It's a topic, because he wasn't particularly great throwing the ball against Penn State. He threw 2 interceptions. I didn't love what I saw from him because Penn State cued in on him running the ball. When he can't really run the ball, he becomes like kind of less dynamic. He's kind of like Jalen Hurts. We kind of were talking about Jalen Hurts off there, where Jalen Hurts doesn't have the quarterback run. He becomes a little bit more pedestrian.
Yeah, Riley Leonard was definitely all over the place. Like, he had some big plays. The touchdown at the end was wide open, but that was still a nice throw. He had 2 interceptions, and they were both bad. The second one, at least, was like really bad to the defensive ends on Penn State. Like, that You can't do that. Like, you cannot do that in this game.
He didn't feel comfortable dropping back.
No.
And it doesn't get more comfortable against Ohio State's pass rush. It's not like it's any more comfortable.
I mean, 223 yards is definitely a lot for him passing. A lot of that came on that one big play. Greathouse took over in second half. That was kind of crazy.
They need someone like that. They need a couple performances from a couple of those guys. But also, Notre Dame's O-line is banged up, and it's not great right now. That has to be a cause for concern.
I wonder, how much rest is between? They played Thursday to Monday, so you have a week and a half. I don't know, who will be back or not. But they had guys going down. Notre Dame, their pass defense is elite. We saw that against Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
They made Drew Aller very uncomfortable. They made him look pretty bad for most of that game, as they did to Gunnar Stockton, different situation, as they did to Curtis Rourke for most of that game, and he's a veteran. The rush defense is concerning.
It is.
Not only in that game, but on the season, the regular season, they were giving up 133 rush yards per game, which is surprising given how much they've just been leading in every game,
Also, some of the team. And also, you said it last week, it's skewed because of
they did play the service academies. But we saw last week, Penn State was able to get things on the ground for solid portions of that game.
Doesn't get easier this week.
The question is what's Ohio State's game plan going to be? Because you don't really know, because they've come out for these games with just radically different game plans. Michigan, they tried to run a lot. Indiana, they tried to run a good amount. Tennessee, it was the air raid offense. Oregon, you kind of got a mix. Texas, their game plan could be very different. I would assume they're going to try to attack Notre Dame on the ground, but also Marcus Freeman knows this as well. Al Golden knows this as well. So it's going to be a very interesting chess match from that dynamic. The Ohio State, Ryan Day, Chip Kelly game plan versus Notre Dame's Marcus Freeman, Al Golden game plan. That's going to be super, super interesting to me.
When I was stumbling, we talked about Notre Dame's defense, I was looking at some stats here. Notre Dame particularly plays man-to-man defense, right? They put their corners on an island because their corners are really good. Right? Benjamin Morrison's a stud. They got I think he's out too. But whatever, their corners are really good. Ohio State sees man coverage 19% of the time this year. They've seen 19% of the time, mainly because Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith, if you put them on an island, you probably are going to lose. For the most part, of 95% of the corners in the league in college football are going to lose one-on-one coverage against Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka.
Yeah.
And I ask you this: if you're Notre Dame, do you just stick with what works, right? Do you just run your man coverage and you just trust that they can guard against Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka? And the 19% is not because Ohio State can't beat zone coverage.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of lesser of two evils.
It slows you down at least a little bit.
Zone gives you less of a chance of getting beat over the top, more or less. Man, obviously, there's more of a chance you get beat. Does Notre Dame stick to the bread and butter and run man, or do they have to kind of adjust?
I think they'll have to mix things up a little bit. I don't think they're that arrogant to what's going on.
Yes,
and Xavier Watts, how they move him around will be kind of the interesting.
Kind of like that Kyle Hamilton.
Kind of like
Kyle Hamilton.
So I'll be very interested to see that. How much they stack the box. Are they going to dare Ohio State to try to commit to the run game and hope that they can just do enough to stop them there? I don't know. But it's not none of Notre Dame could play an amazing defense game like Texas did. They're still going to give up probably 20 points, If Notre Dame holds Ohio State to less than 20 points, I'd be surprised. And that's nothing against Notre Dame's defense. That's just how low to Ohio State's offense is. So Notre Dame's going to have to bring it somewhere on offense. Maybe that's special teams. Maybe they get a few turnovers, punt return touchdown, blocked punt. They've had a trillion blocked punts the last few seasons. And Ohio State special teams isn't incredible. Their kicker is not a strength.
Even Notre Dame's kicker, he's been good in the playoff.
He's been good in the playoffs. See, that game winner was that was a legit game winner. That wasn't
yeah, 100%.
there's going to have to be something like that, kick return touchdown versus Georgia, big interception versus Penn State. Like they just make these plays that you can't really.
You can't predict. When you and I talk about that, we can't break. It's hard to break down. Well, they need 2 interceptions. Like that's hard to predict. We can break down. They're going to play man coverage. If they're play zone coverage. If they're going to lean on the run. All that fun stuff. It's hard to predict a special teams play. It's hard to predict a defensive play. You might have to because Notre Dame somehow every game gets a big special team play. They did against Georgia, or a defensive play. Penn State and obviously against Georgia. But once again, it feels like when we're talking about this game, it was similar to the Ohio State-Texas conversation we had. It feels like Ohio State's not playing Notre Dame. It feels like Ohio State's playing Minnesota or Indiana, right? Like that type of team. They're not, but they're 8.5-point favorites in a national championship game. It's just because of how good Ohio State's been in the last 3 weeks, right? Like before Michigan, probably not. This game is not 8.5, obviously, but because of what they did to Tennessee and what they did to Oregon and how they outlasted Texas, they're 8.5-point favorites. And I agree. I think Notre Dame needs something because I don't know if Notre Dame straight up can just beat Ohio State. I just think offensively, like their offense versus their defense and Ohio State's offense versus Notre Dame's defense. Like obviously, I think Notre Dame's defense can keep them in the game and all that kind of fun stuff. I keep going back to this, and they keep sort of proving me wrong almost. Like I talked about it last week when I picked Penn State. I don't know if Notre Dame can make enough plays offensively. I don't know if they really did, if it was more of just forcing some turnovers. They made enough. I'm not saying it took them over the top. I feel like this is the type of game where if whoever's when people are recapping this game and Notre Dame ends up winning, they made it a ton of offensive plays, like a ton of explosive plays. I just don't see it from Notre Dame. I don't know. Riley Leonard did not give me a lot of control. Like he didn't give me a lot of confidence.
If you just told me, like, described how Riley Leonard played, I would have been like, yeah, Penn State won by like 10, But like Drew Aller played very poorly too. Something when you were talking about Ohio State made me think of like Dan Lanning's like motto at Oregon. His 3 years there now has been every game it's Oregon versus Oregon. Like they say that in the locker room. That's like their thing that like we're playing us every week. And that's kind of how it's felt with Ohio State. And last week they weren't as crisp. Like they had bad penalties, like personal, like foul penalties, like some hold. Like they just were sloppier than they had been, but they were still good enough. And another interesting point that I feel like has been talked about a lot this week is that these two teams respectively have the 2 most embarrassing, surprising losses of the season, probably. I mean, I don't know if you can call losing to 7-5 Michigan that embarrassing, but the context of it, it really was.
4 years in a row at home,
20
how it ended with the
and then Northern Illinois obviously is. So I'm not even talking about like the playoff format and anything, just for these two teams, both took those losses and really responded and rallied around them. Yep. I mean, Notre Dame did it for the whole season, and Ohio State's done it for the playoff. Like, I mean, I straight up picked them to lose to Tennessee. I thought they were good. They were like throwing in the towel, and they did the complete opposite. Notre Dame, that game was so shocking. Week 2, they get the big win versus A&M. They lose at home. No, that's like unfathomable. Mm-hmm. And
that was Riley Leonard had some bad interceptions.
Yeah, it was terrible. And they really use that as like a motivating moment. I don't think that I think that kind of offsets itself in this game, but I think that is like part of the reason why both these two teams are in this game because
I agree.
You got to get like both coaching staffs did a really good job because Marcus Freeman was taking a lot of heat after that game, and Ryan Day was taking unfathomable heat after the Michigan game.
If Ryan Day was fired the day after Michigan game ended, about 95% of Ohio State fans would have been, let's go.
Happy.
Yeah. Marcus Freeman was a little different, but yes. Yes. And now Ryan Day is a game away from winning a national championship and probably not being fined for another 10 years.
No,
and look, I'm not going to sit here. I'm not going to pull a first take kind of thing and ask who this game means more to, because it's the freaking national championship and it means a lot for both teams and it means a lot for both coaches. So we're not going to talk about that because that's a really freaking, I hate those conversations sometimes because, yeah, no shit. This game means a lot for both teams. It's the national freaking title and you don't know when you can come back. But if you're Ryan Day, like you winning a national title and you rewind a month ago and you're losing to Michigan at home, like it's something that no one saw coming. You didn't see coming. I picked them to win Tennessee, but I didn't think they were going to win the national title. No. And then like the Oregon game was a toss up. Then they just boat race Oregon. Now we're like the 2019 LSU all of a sudden. Like it's just like in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. And what it does for both programs, and obviously Notre Dame hasn't won a national title since the 80s. Ohio State won the first 4-team college football playoff under Urban Meyer. But it's crazy for where both of these teams have. Obviously, Ohio State more recently, but where Notre Dame has come from earlier in the year. And Notre Dame a couple years ago, right? Like they lost to Marshall a couple years ago. Like it's been good under Marcus Freeman, but it hasn't been like great under Marcus Freeman until this year. And they find a way to be in the national title game and beat some good teams along the way.
Yeah, and I mean these teams played in a really great game last year at Notre Dame Stadium.
Oh, and we got the Lou Holtz versus Ryan Day conversation.
Like the quarterbacks were different. Obviously, it was Kyle McCord versus Sam Hartman, a lot of the rosters. But a lot of them were
McCord and Will Howard are the same freaking quarterback.
That was a crazy game. Notre Dame went up like 6, and then they
didn't have enough men on the field at the end of the game, too.
They didn't get on the field. They had one of their players dropped an interception that would have won them the game. I think Ohio State converted a 4th down too. Like Ohio State had a crazy drive that if I was a Notre Dame fan would have like kept me up like for ages. Now it turns out Notre Dame ended up like losing like 3 other games next year, so it didn't like matter in terms of playoff championship, that stuff. But just in the game itself, and Jeremiah Love said it this week. He said like we want revenge for that game. We feel like we should have won that game. I don't know if revenge is enough to buy you 8 points from.
Funny thing is, like some of those players, some of the key players on Ohio State didn't even play in that game. Jeremiah,
but pretty much everyone on Notre Dame did for Riley Leonard. You know,
if Ohio State wins this game, do we get something from Ryan Day on Lou Holtz in the post-game presser?
I hope so. He deserves it at that point, or Ryan Day's earned the right to like make a joke about it for sure.
It's a funny little.
If Notre Dame wins, they're gonna bring Lou Holtz like down to the field. Like,
is he going to the game?
I don't think so. Okay. Or I don't know. Where's the game? Oh, Atlanta.
It's Atlanta.
That's kind of I'm sure the SEC fans. Games in Atlanta, Notre Dame versus a Big Ten team. That's gotta not great.
One team with no conference and one team with the conference. Maybe James Franklin will show up halfway through the game and talking about conferences. I think we touched. Did we touched on everything? Let us know down in the comment section who you guys got. Ohio State, Notre Dame. As of right now, on Thursday night, Ohio State is 8.5-point favorites. Obviously, college football spreads are always a little bigger than NFL spreads. Actually, if you look at the divisional round, there's a lot of big spreads, so maybe that's not always true. Ryan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, national title. Both coaches looking for their first national championship as a coach or as a head coach. No, as a coach. I don't think Ryan Day was anywhere near that Urban Meyer staff, was he?
By that time, I'm not sure, but I don't think so.
And did Freeman win a national title at Ohio State as a player? I know he.
That's a good question.
That's also another cool. We didn't mention that.
Marcus Freeman played at Ohio State. No, Ryan Day was not on the 2014 staff.
So Marcus Freeman can't lose this week. That's what I'm hearing now.
Marcus Freeman. No, he was at. So Ohio State won in 2002. He played there 04 to 08, so we just missed it.
No, but yeah, Marcus Freeman's a former Ohio State Buckeye, which is a little cool caveat. Most people don't realize that. Most people don't realize he played, but he looks like he still could play. Dude's in some pretty good shape over there. But yeah,
Notre Dame wins. Do you think Ohio State gave him a blank check on the sideline?
Do we have any of those discourse like after the game? Like is Ryan like this won't happen for Notre Dame because it's a little different. Like are Ohio State's if they lose to Notre Dame, it's a great game. Is Ryan Day like gonna have that same crap again this offseason?
He might. Among the fan base, he might. I don't know.
He's not gonna get fired, obviously. That'd be unreal. But there's what's gonna happen. Ohio State like these big program fans that expect to win a national title every year are like, it's insane.
if he got fired the day after the Michigan game, I think most non-Ohio State fans would have been like, yeah, like I see why they did that. Like I'll hire him. He's an amazing record.
He wants to come coach
good
Virginia
coach.
Tech and win 9,
But
10 games every year. I'm not going to
like you lose to Michigan
win.
4 times in a row. The average fan would have probably been like, I understand why they fired him.
Mm-hmm.
That's obviously blowing out the window. Ohio State, they said like what? They have 3 goals for the season, right? Beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, win the national championship. They didn't do either of the first 2. If they lose this game, that means they still didn't do the third, no matter 99% of fan bases would kill for the seasons Ohio State had up to this point, even if they lose. I think them losing to Notre Dame makes it worse because they definitely view themselves as like much better. Like we're the Big Ten powerhouse. Like if they lost to, let's say,
Prime Georgia
or Alabama, I think that's a different conversation. But, I mean, that's up to them. That's up to the Ohio State fans.
And Ryan Day would be hired really fast for a head coach job.
At a really good program.
Yes.
Whoever needs. Yeah.
Virginia Tech. Ohio State, Notre Dame, Ryan, who do you got? Does the team cover? Vice versa. What do we got for score prediction?
Yeah, so I picked Notre Dame to win and cover 3 times, and they've delivered all 3 times. You have not. You've been hating on Notre Dame twice. I almost mushed Ohio State last week by picking them. So I'm going to kind of hedge here. I'm going to take Ohio State to win 27-20, Notre Dame to cover. I really don't think this one will be crazy. I see this going very similar to the Ohio State Texas game. Good defenses, few big plays, like running the ball. Could Ohio State be up 7 and they score to go 14? Absolutely. But I don't see this being like a Tennessee situation where Notre Dame just run out of the building. They're too tough, like too well coached. Their defense is too good, I think, for that to be the case. Now, if Riley Leonard throws like 3 interceptions, then that's the pathway for that to happen, I think. But I'll stick with it being a close game. I think it will be.
Yeah, I've picked against Notre Dame when they played Georgia. I was wrong. I picked against Notre Dame when they played Penn State. I was wrong. So what am I going to do again? I'm picking against Notre Dame again. I got Ohio State 27, Notre Dame 17. Kind of like that backdoor kind of cover like they did against Texas. I think it's a close game. I think a 10-point game is considered a pretty close game in my opinion.
Yeah.
Where the spread's at. I think it's a close game. I do think Ohio State probably covers at the end of the day, but I can see you said 27-20. I have 27.
Yeah, we're right along the same lines there.
We're on the same line there. I think Ohio State's just going to do enough, right? Like they did enough against Texas. I think I agree with you on that kind of comparison. It's a very similar style of game. It's comes down to me like, can Riley Leonard make enough plays? And I said it the last couple of weeks, and he has, but he still hasn't elevated his game to where I think I'm super confident in them. And the fact that they struggle to stop the run against Penn State really concerns me. The fact that they have Krishan Junkins and Trevion Henderson coming into town, and that 2-headed monster is really tough to stop. And then, look, Ohio State is a juggernaut right now. I don't think we get an Oregon performance, but I think we kind of get a little better from offensively than what we saw against Texas. So I like Ohio State 27, Notre Dame 17. Sick. Anything else you got to say before we get out here? And obviously, everyone comment down below who you guys got.
No, I mean, it's been a fun season. It's been a fun semifinals. Were great.
Yeah, let's get a great game. Let's get a great game. I don't need a classic. Everyone needs
a classic championship game. I'm trying to think. Like last year's was a 7-point game at halftime, and then Michigan pulled away. But Georgia TCU was obviously a blowout.
Oh, that wasn't a classic?
So yeah, I guess Georgia Bama.
Oh yeah, Georgia Bama.
Good one.
It's Georgia Bama.
Yeah. I'm
going all the way back. Freaking started at 1900 with Yale versus some other team. Georgia Bama 2021 probably. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was a great game. I don't know. Georgia, yeah. Clemson won.
Clemson LSU was a good game for like 2.5 quarters.
And like obviously the Clemson Alabama games, like Deshaun Watson, but we're going back there.
Yeah.
No, look, we want it to be a great game. It's two historic programs, right? There was 4 historic programs in the semifinals. And look, love the 12-team college football playoff. I think it's a cool, obviously they need to tinker with the format, but we got 2 teams that Ohio State definitely would not have been in the 4-team. I don't know if Notre Dame would have been.
I think they would have if it was
in
the old format, but I mean, we don't know.
We'll talk about it. Yeah. Look, Ohio State definitely would not have been in it. They were 10-2. And Notre Dame would have been on that last day conversation for that 4th spot.
Yeah.
So, look, it's interesting. It's fun. And it gives 2 big powerhouses another chance to win a national title. So, yeah, that's awesome. That was a little sarcastic, if you couldn't tell. But, no, this could be a great game. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this episode. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed all our college football content for the last month. We did a lot. We did a first round, quarterfinal, and semifinal preview, and then we did obviously our college. Oh, I also did a conference championship round preview. We did a lot of college football content on the platform. If you guys like football, don't go anywhere. We have obviously, if you haven't watched it yet, flip over to the divisional round preview, and then obviously coming in the next couple of weeks, AFC, NFC championship preview, and then obviously the big one, the Super Bowl preview. So don't go anywhere for that. Ryan's gonna take a hiatus until next year. So it's been a pleasure, Ryan. Appreciate you coming on for 4 episodes. And as always, follow us on social media at Talking Sports PD on X and on Instagram. And as always, we are sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you guys use code TSP for a 100% deposit match up to $100. Link is in the description. That's going to do it for us. Hopefully you guys enjoyed all this college football content. Hopefully you guys enjoyed college football preview. Enjoy the game, Ohio State versus Notre Dame. If not, then that's nothing you can do about it. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube as always. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.